I'm good to go? Morning. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2014. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Soboroff, Figueroa Villa, Kim, Madison, and Saltzman are present, and we have a quorum.
I would like to open the meeting, dedicate the meeting to and have a moment of silence for the tragic loss of two LAPD officers. Police Officer George Nagata, a 33-year veteran from the Central area, was lost to a heart attack over the weekend. And as we all know, Police Officer Roberto Sanchez, a 6-year veteran from the Harvard Division, was lost in a horrific traffic collision over the weekend as well. The services for Officer Nagata will be held on Tuesday, May 13th, I think at 1 o'clock. And the services for Officer Sanchez will be held on Wednesday, May 14th. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. May this be the last time in a long, long time that we have to open one of these meetings with a moment of silence for one of our officers. Let's proceed.
We will begin with item number 1 on the agenda, Commission comments.
Commissioner Kim? Commissioner Sandra? Commissioner Saltzman?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. First, I, of course, share your the comments that you made about the officers and appreciate your having us take that time. I do have two announcements, two comments. One is, I think as my fellow commissioners know, this evening is one of the chief's quarterly forums with the LGBTQ community, and Commissioner Madison and I are both planning to attend, and we will next week report back on what we hear and learn. Obviously, if others have time and can attend, you're welcome, but the two of us will be there. The second is, I'm sure my fellow commissioners saw the news about a jury verdict yesterday in a lawsuit of employees against the department, and I'm not commenting on the specifics of the case, but I want to assure my fellow commissioners and the public that Commissioner Kim and I form a subcommittee to review and closely monitor the litigation, and we are paying close attention to this issue. In fact, this afternoon, Commissioner Kim and I are meeting with the department's risk manager, Arif Alikan, on another topic, and I'm sure we will talk about this case as well. I raise it simply to make the point that the Commission has for some time wanted the department to focus on risk management, and one of the significant areas of that is employee litigation. And now that Mr. Alikan's been here for nearly a quarter, we're looking forward to seeing some progress in that area. And I'm hoping we will. Clearly, we would all agree that the money in that lawsuit could have been spent better in the department in other ways. Thank you.
Commissioner Madison? This morning I had the pleasure of meeting with some members of the Domestic Violence Task Force for the City of Los Angeles. And I asked them to stick around and tell us a little bit during public comment about what they do. But here today is Pat Butler, Bennett Shermer, Eve Sheedy, and Carol Tantau from the Domestic Violence task force, and your attendance is appreciated and acknowledged. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have 2 public comment cards on this item. We have Ted Hayes.
It just occurred to me that as far as litigation is concerned, there's no public figure other than myself that has more cause to sue the LAPD. Let me tell you about the most recent incident. I had a public storage toss-up, and they wanted to evict me. But the judge decided that they could not do that for 15 days, and so there was a court order issued to public storage to that effect. The sheriff refused to serve the order. Why? I don't know. But anyway, he told me to go to the LAPD. That's when things really got bad. So the LAPD went with me to the public storage facility on Jefferson and La Cienega. And when the manager said, "Oh, we're not going to let him have his stuff," the police put me in handcuffs with my court order, drove me downtown to Skid Row, and put me out and told me, "By the time you get the bus back there, they will be closed." Now, due process means they follow court orders, right? Well, they didn't, and they put me in handcuffs, and later on, they would not pursue the person who roughed me up when I tried to get my property. So I have not ever sued the city, because you don't sue the police department, ever. You don't sue the chief, ever. You sue the city, and the city pays for this malfeasance, the things that they do. End of that comment. The cameras were rolling, the microphones were on, and at a meeting, the police disturbed the meeting under Penal Code Section 403 of the Penal Code. They disturbed the meeting, they brought it to a close. The public that was allowed to speak were not allowed to speak. They had to plead to get, anyway, it was pretty bad. But members of the court witnessed it. The chief witnessed it. What's going to happen? We're looking forward.
Our next speaker is Jabral Mohammed.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chief, and Chief Paysinger. Regarding risk management, this is Jabril Muhammad for Bismillah, the Justice Movement. And we're speaking for the people. My prayers are that we are. And in doing so, it's good to know that the commissioners are taking upon themselves their personal investigation in regards to matters. And in saying that, we, Bismillah, would like very much for them to consider the risk management in regards to public safety. Because we have members of the public and the senior members of the public who have been victimized, and there's been no response by administration in regards to their condition or their safety. Thus, it becomes a risk management in terms of the efforts of a person who has been victimized to seek civil remedy. That's a risk for the city. So when we don't tend to our public and our seniors and those who are subject to assault, then we, in fact, cross the threshold into the risk of being civilly sought. So I would just like to, again, commend the Commission for their personal investigations. And I would like very much to hear in regards to a personal investigation for the public's sake as terms to the risk management. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2 is the report of the Chief of Police, Chief Beck.
Good morning. The department strongly but respectfully disagrees with the jury's verdict in the case discussed by Commissioner Salzman regarding at-will employees who were recruits in the academy and their right to work. I have discussed this directly with Mike Fuhr, the city attorney. He agrees and we both will do all in our power to overturn the verdict. The department Saturday morning suffered 2 deaths, one to a violent traffic collision, and the other to long-term illness. Roberto Sanchez died in Harbor City as a result of that traffic collision. George Nagata fell ill during his regular work duty in the previous week and succumbed to a long-term health condition that morning also. Very sad morning. I think it is particularly ironic that these occur during Police Memorial Month, which is traditionally the month of May. Thursday, the 8th, we will have the Police Memorial Ceremony out in front of the Police Administration Building here, where we will honor the 207 Los Angeles police officers who have passed away in the line of duty during the 146-year history of the Los Angeles Police Department. As Commissioner Soboroff said, there will be a private service on Tuesday for George, and then a very public funeral on Wednesday at the Cathedral of Los Angeles for Roberto Sanchez. On to my normal discussion about crime trends in the city. Violent crime is down 3.6% overall throughout the city of Los Angeles. The only category where we're having increases in aggravated assault, and that's less than 1%. Homicides are down 4.5% as compared to 13, and 16.8% as compared to 12. Property crime is down 9.3% as compared to last year, and 11.6% as compared to 2012. It's a total Part 1 crime reduction, which is the aggregate of violent and property crime, of 8.4%. Shootings are down in the city. Part 1 crime is down in all 4 of the city's bureaus. Total gang crime down 17.6% as compared to 2013, and 31% as compared to 2012. Officer-involved shootings are down 28.6%. We've had 10 so far this year as compared to 14 in 2013. Traffic collisions are up 0.4%. That is a total of 58 more traffic collisions in the city of Los Angeles than occurred last year. Driving under the influence related traffic collisions are down almost 11%. Hit and run collisions are down in the aggregate 7.6%. And those that suffer either serious injuries or death are down just over 20%. Motor vehicle versus pedestrian collisions are down in total just under 0.5%, and bicycle involved collisions are down 4.1%. We have 9,906 sworn personnel, reserve officers, 269 level 1s, 21 levels 2, 340 level 3, 372 specialist volunteers, 38 chaplain counselors. Civilian personnel deployment stands at 2,780, and we have 4,642 cadets in our program. And I also look forward to attending the LGBTQ forum tonight, and look forward to talking to the public there. That concludes my report.
Okay, we do have 2 public comment cards. We have Mr. Tud Hayes.
The Down report's all over the news. It was not really Keystone Cops, but it was pretty much significant of what happens when there's a huge crisis. I remember when a president was killed and someone didn't know who succeeds the president. I think that was the first time I ever found out just what the line of succession is when the president is killed, or the vice president after that. We simply did not know. It wasn't taught in my civics class. But when officers decide to self-deploy, And they take their weapons with them and their badge. They have a right to have a weapon at all times, and they are police personnel under 830 of the Penal Code. And no one's in charge. No one's running this enterprise, this huge, massive turnout of police.
Mr. Hayes, please keep your comments on topic, on the chief's report and the items that he just spoke about.
Ma'am, if you look at the agenda, there is no language identifying what the
Mr.
topic
Hayes, I'm
is.
not going to argue with
The
you. Please
topic
keep
is
your comments
open
on
when there's
topic.
no.
Thank you.
The Brown Act says 25 words or less to describe the topic. There are no words. There are less than any words other than chief's report, inspector general's report, and that's it. So
Mr.
what are
Hayes,
you
your
talking
comments are
about?
more appropriate for public comment at the conclusion of this meeting, not for the chief's report.
Well,
Not
may
for
it-
this item.
Let me try to address it for your behalf. I believe the chief of police was concerned about what was happening with a former police officer. And I believe that somehow he should have been in command to the other agencies who would like to provide assistance. And I'm trying to find out whether he or anyone else can comment on whether or not there's some structure to determine how things are done when there is an incident similar to this one. Do you understand what it's about now? Do you? No comment. At any rate,
Thank you, sir. You come back and finish up at the, you put a card in at the end. Come back and put your card in for the overall public comments.
well, this is a topic. It's not a.
We'll give you more time, but do it at the tail
There are
end.
two things. This is testimony. Public comment is not.
Mr. Hayes, you're going to have to put in another card.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Mr. Jabral Mohammed.
Jabril Muhammad for Bismillah, the Justice Movement. Again, good morning, Commissioners. This is in regards to Chief's objection to the verdict that was given in regards to the decision made. You know, I'm not, I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't read that information. I'm not familiar with the verdict. But I'm familiar with the disposition of the commission. And that's not to say per se, but to say that the chief has a great deal of sway. So now, my comment in regards to that is that given the attitude of the chief, for him to object, to me, that means that the verdict was adverse to the department. Now, the department has been doing some things that are adverse to the public. So, my curiosity is tempered by the fact that the chief is in objection to it. That being said, I pray that justice prevail for all involved, because this is the movement in which I've been inspired to be about, a justice movement. And it's good to know that the courts are involved with the administration of it, and it's good to know that the commission is involved in the overseeing of it. That's my comment.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 3, report of the executive director, Mr. T. Fank.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the commission. No report today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 4, the report of the inspector general, Mr. Bustamante.
Thank you, Commissioners. Just briefly, I also will be in attendance tonight at the LGBTQ forum, as I have been in the past. And that concludes my report.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Item number 5 consists of information and filed items relative to noise variances and special event permits submitted for the period ending May 2nd, 2014. Item number 6, presentations. Do we have any presentations this morning?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Item number 7 is consent agenda items. These items are considered to be routine and uncontroversial, upon which the board is provided with adequate information for approval without inquiry or discussion?
I'll move approval with thanks to each of the donors.
Second.
Thank
All in
you.
favor?
Okay. Item number 8, regular agenda items. Item 8A is a verbal presentation. Would a commissioner wish to pull an item as special from 8B through 8E?
I'd like to hold item 8E for discussion.
Let's have a motion for approval for 8B, C, and D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. We'll begin with item number 8A, Department's verbal update and discussion relative to the status of the field test of the on-body camera project.
Morning, Maggie, Dan.
Morning.
How are we doing?
Good morning. Maggie Goodrich, CIO for LAPD. I'm joined by Sergeant Dan Gomez.
It hasn't been taken care of. You can speak on it. It hasn't been determined yet. You can speak on it.
Okay.
So I'll begin with a brief update on body worn and then happy to answer any questions. So we are actually this week wrapping up the first 90-day test. That's with the solution from TASER. We are conducting a final survey of all of the volunteers who participated in this round. We've been doing surveys along the way about every 30 days, so we'll do a final survey to get their feedback, both on the technology and on the policy itself.
So in this 90 days, you've had both, there are two different types of equipment from the TASER company?
Correct, and we've been
And
testing
both
both.
of those have been tested?
Yes.
Over this 90-day period?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. And then starting about May 14th, we'll begin the training on the next solution, which is the solution from Coban. That's one type of camera from Coban, and then we'll begin that 90-day test.
Okay.
And same process, same volunteers with Safer Cities. We'll, again, do surveys every 30 days, ask for input on the technology itself and on the policy as well. We are working through a handful of administrative things to just get ready for that, make sure the system's set and ready for them to go. We also have to modify the draft policy a little bit, just because the technology is a little different in the way you activate it and also upload the video. The other thing we'll be doing over the next 90 days is Sergeant Gomez in the tactical technology section will actually be doing a side-by-side comparison of the two solutions. So they'll do a much deeper technical dive into the solutions and do really apples to apples comparison. They'll look at low light situations, testing different types of events, and really getting into the details on the technical aspects of the solutions. While all that's going on, we're also then continuing the discussions with the various stakeholders. So we've had several meetings now, I think 2 meetings now, with the representatives from the Police Protective League since I was last here. We just had one last week. We have another one scheduled a few weeks out. We're meeting with them about every 30 days. At those meetings, we have those meetings with Employee Relations Group as well as Planning and Research Division. The Inspector General is represented in those meetings. The President of Police Protective League, Tyler Eisen, attends, along with a few others from the league. And then also we invite officers from Central who are part of the field test to come and provide their feedback. And those have been very helpful in shedding light on some issues. The next meeting that's scheduled, rather than just focusing around sort of general questions and feedback, we're going to really dive into the policy itself. The league is going to share sort of their initial list of concerns based on what's been in the draft policy. And we'll start diving into those issues.
And who are other stakeholders, and when will they engage, and when will the public also engage?
So we've had an initial meeting with the city attorney and the ACLU present. Peter Biebring from the ACLU attended the first meeting. We're scheduling a follow-up that'll occur in a few weeks here to continue those discussions. Much of the ACLU position was expressed in an earlier opinion paper that the ACLU had released. We've asked the ACLU if they have anything additional to add, any other concerns, anything that's not raised in that opinion, to please bring those to us. So we'll continue those conversations, again, in a follow-up meeting in a couple weeks here. The other thing we're working on is setting up a easy-to-use electronic means to receive input from the community, as you had requested.
Good.
So I'm working with Peter Marks, who is the Chief Innovation and Technology Officer for Mayor Garcetti, and also, so he's helping me on the technology side figure out what the best platform is for just an easy-to-use online experience.
Because we're time sensitive in that now.
Correct.
Right.
And then I am working with Dr. Jeff Bradingham at UCLA. He's a professor in anthropology who also directs their mathematical and simulation modeling of crime project at UCLA. He's going to help us actually develop the questions that will be posed to the community. I'm also asking the ACLU for any input on those questions that will be posed, and then that will be made available online. The plan is to have that up online and ready to go probably within the next 30 to 45 days max.
Okay.
And we'll be sure to come and announce that here, as well as make it available on lapdonline.org.
Okay. Questions?
A couple comments and then a question. I appreciate all the work, clearly hard work, and a lot of it that you're doing, and it sounds like good progress. The question is the Inspector General involved in this stakeholder process, and where does that come in?
Yes. So there's been a representative from the Inspector
Great.
General at all of the meetings we've had with employee relations and,
Okay.
and the league.
And then the others, just a comment, maybe premature, but maybe not, and maybe unnecessary, which is one of the things I think was clear to me from the rollout in South Bureau of the in-car video was, I think some of the problems were created by our desire to be comprehensive, complex, and I guess I would just encourage you to think about keeping it simple. So where we have choices of doing less rather than more, it may actually be better to do less to be able to make this function the way we need it to. So I just offer that. It's my
Thank
2
you.
cents.
I have a FYI and also a question. The FYI, I was in New York over the weekend and went to the NYPD and heard directly from Commissioner Bratton that they are watching every moment of what you're doing. They, in his words, they're a year behind, and they're letting you do all the work because they think you do it great. And the way you're handling this with the public and with the stakeholders is important, but the testing is also important. And so big cities, specifically New York, are watching and very carefully to emulate what you're doing and learn from what you're doing. So I hope you feel that. I was not the glamour, but the responsibility of that, because
Absolutely.
it is a big responsibility. Second thing is, how's it going? Okay, in other words, what are the initial reports? What are your pluses and minuses? We can take them all here. We're all friends. So
So, Commissioner,
what's coming back to us?
to your point, I am in constant contact with the New York folks, so I do feel it, and I think they're trying to access my
You feel
computer
the glamour
directly.
or the responsibility?
Not the glamour, sir. Definitely not the glamour. But overall, the program has been well received by the central officers. I mean, really, all the credit goes to them because they're actually deploying them. They've been eager to learn, ask questions. As we've mentioned before, as we went through the program, additional people volunteered for it. Actually, more people volunteered than we actually had units for. So that's always a good sign. There have been some technical glitches, small things. As you mentioned, there are two different type of cameras that they're deploying. One is a system that they just wear on their chest. Another one has an additional cord that is hooked up to a camera that can be moved, say, from their glasses or to their lapel. That one has been the least popular of the two, mainly because as they start to normal course of their duty, get in and out of car, chase people, get involved in altercations, that tends to fall off. So you still get the audio, which is certainly relevant, but the actual video angle, so that's been a common complaint from the officers. All this information we're sharing with TASER, and as we move forward into the COBAN project, we'll also be sharing any direct feedback we get so we can make improvements. Smaller is always better. Officers always want the devices to be smaller. We use it as an opportunity as well to educate the officers as we go through the different programs, to tell them, the reason why it's built the way it is, not just here is the product, just use it. Certainly we're trying to make sure that we have enough battery power to last, anywhere from 12 to 14 hours per shift, which causes the device to be a little bit larger. So those are the kind of educational, we get a little bit from them, we give a little bit back so that they understand why they have something rather than here, just use it. So it's been a good back and forth.
And how about the practical? Do the officers feel like the cameras are an aid in keeping issues from escalating? What are their reports?
Yeah, in general, I would say that the general consensus is yes, they do think that it's beneficial to them. They're always concerned about timely activation of the system, because again, everything is a manual activation for the officer. So clearly in situations where they just have to react, the camera becomes I turn it on when applicable, when practicable. But that is one issue that they're always concerned about. But in general, the overall comments have been it has de-escalated certain situations, or I've gotten comments very specific as, I'm glad I had it because I was able to show X, Y, Z. So those comments have been good, because essentially that's what we're trying to do, is show the good work that they're doing in the field and be able to have video evidence to support that good work.
And do you think that the public is being protected by these so far?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we've always said from the beginning that the cameras, see both ends, and that's what we want. It holds the officers accountable. It holds the community, shows what's happening during the interaction. So I think both are key. And certainly we get from the officers quite often that it's actually a point of engagement, a talking point, because they see it on the officers and they'll want to engage and talk to them. So it gives them that opportunity to have that conversation with them and dispel bad rumors and also kind of show exactly what's going on. So it really has helped both ways.
And my last question, but just for clarification over and over again, is an officer obligated to say to, in the situation or to a potential arrestee, that they are recording? And if they aren't obligated to, is it an optional thing for them to do?
So based on the current guidelines, Commissioner, the officer is not required to tell them. It's certainly a situation-by-situation basis. We've had specific instances where, in one particular case, a supervisor felt it was good to tell the person because it actually de-escalated a situation that was happening in the lobby at Central Station. And it actually did de-escalate the situation. So as of today, we're leaving that up to the officers to be able to disclose that information, but certainly as part of the greater policy discussion we're having with the group that Ms. Goodrich already identified, we're having those discussions as well.
I just have one follow-up question.
Go ahead.
As to that. And the camera itself is conspicuous, though, I imagine. So is that, can you comment on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're not covert in any way, shape, or form. For lack of a better description, the one that's on the body is just larger than, say, a cigarette pack. So it's almost rectangular in size. It has a TASER emblem on it. It's pretty obvious when you talk to an officer. It is black, but it certainly stands out from their uniform, from everything else that's, as very neat and tight. It stands out. And certainly the flexible camera that's either on the glasses or on the shoulder, it's like looking at something from a space age movie. It certainly stands out, and as I mentioned, it does start that conversation with the community.
How about in a foot pursuit? Does it flop around? How stable is it?
Sure. So overall, the cameras are actually pretty stable because, especially in the pursuit or inside a vehicle, they're sitting in their vehicle. So there is movement from the driving in of the car. But overall, the video has been pretty good from that. I will qualify that with it certainly depends on body stature. So some officers that are taller, you get a better field of view out of the camera, depending on where they're wearing it, out of the vehicle. And again, it just depends on the type amount and where they're wearing it. But certainly from a car perspective, it is different than what you see in in-car video, but certainly it does provide some useful video. Again, it varies on officer to officer, but the overall motion is pretty good. As a matter of fact, it takes you a little while to watch it because it's almost that sensation of being on a roller coaster when you're watching it on the computer screen.
And the quality of the, is it grainy? Is it HD?
So we use standard definition. We don't use high definition in this particular project, mainly because of the file size, the amount of time it would take to upload if it was high definition. But overall quality is good. I mean, certainly it's not enhanced in any way. It's designed so that you would see essentially what the officer would see with their naked eye. So if it is dark outside, the video itself is going to be dark because that's what the perception of the officer would be. But overall, the quality has been good.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Good morning. I'm wondering if, in the near future, we might have a couple of officers one wearing the taser and one wearing the Coban, who might come in, because I'm very interested in knowing how the camera is turned on. Is it a one-step operation? And the part about it that is subject to, I guess, circumstance and time. In the analysis of the video that's shot, I'm interested in knowing the fact that the police officer has some determination as to when that's turned on. So I'm hoping that in this analysis, ultimately, of the two systems, one of the things that would be looked at is the amount of time that transpires between the officer exiting the car or whatever and the camera being turned on. And I say that because I've seen some instances where, certainly not in a videotape situation of on-body cameras, but because it's subject to judgment, I'm interested in knowing how we're going to do that analysis based on the demonstration project, and then ultimately what's worked out in terms of the overall guidelines, because I'm assuming that aspect would be a part of the guidelines.
Absolutely. That will be part of the analysis and part of the discussion we have as far as the detail that goes into the guidelines. And at our next briefing, we're happy to have a couple of officers come in and model the different cameras for you, and we can talk about how they're activated and how they work.
Is it possible that that you have three different kinds of options? Is it possible that you will not pick one option for all 600 units? And you will do a mix and match, or does it look like you'll pick one? I mean, I know if the loading and the storage system for Taser is different than Coban, so you wouldn't pick in between, I don't think. But is it possible there's going to be a hybrid here?
It's difficult to say at this point because we haven't started the testing of the Coban solution. I would say at this point anything's possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions?
We do have two public comment cards. We have Jabral Mohammed.
Are there enough cards out there so Mr. Hayes can get cards when he needs them? Good.
Good morning again, Commissioners.
Morning,
Chief. This is Jabril Muhammad for Bismillah, the Justice Movement. I was really looking forward to this demonstration. I was looking for a demonstration. Here is a matter of discretion. Are we giving the officers the discretion as to when to turn these cameras on and off, or is this something that's going on automatically? And then here again too, Bismillah is concerned about the commissioners being satisfied with these reports. Now, I believe that the city of Los Angeles is sophisticated enough for the presenters of this presentation to let us see a visual demonstration of how all of this is going on. Okay, and we're 90 days into this project, and we don't even know what the cameras look like. Okay, here again is When you say it's different from the car video, how can we tell? Can we see it? This is, again, I don't want to sound redundant, but this is, again, we need to see these things. You says satisfactual when practical. I don't understand what those terms mean, but here again, we're getting a verbal a presentation here, and it's not satisfactual. And because we don't get a chance to see how practical these cameras are. We know how important they were in evidence, Rodney King and things of this nature. So we're looking forward to them to be as instrumental. But how can we tell? We can't see anything, and thus I object to this report.
Mr. Ted Hayes?
If the cameras protect the public, we'll soon find out. If a camera discloses that an officer is kicking a suspect who eventually dies, the cameras will be effective. But it didn't protect the public because the officers probably knew they were being recorded, or officer, when she was kicking the suspect. So what use is the camera? It's almost like discussing the death penalty. Is it really a deterrent or not? Are these cameras going to be an effective deterrent as far as officers' behavior is concerned? Because when you say, does it protect the public, you mean, does it protect the public from the police? That's what you really mean, and you know that. So that's yet to be determined. Now, I've been here where the officers have shown how their stuff works, how their equipment works. Quite right, Commissioner. You need to see how this stuff works. You need to have a complete display on the screen, wherever, showing you how it will function. Now, as far as your ineffective assistance of counsel, yeah, she's laughing.
Stay on topic. Don't get her going again.
The Brown Act says you may not prohibit criticism of what you do or do not do. I was being critical, as always, and that you can't stop me, nor anyone else. Has she got a right to do what she did, or did you give her carte blanche to interrupt anytime she wishes to? She's not a commissioner, you know that.
No, but I will tell you that you need to stay on topic.
Well,
because it's just the rules.
No, the Brown Act says you can criticize, and the board. Look, we need to deal with the Brown Act because that's why I'm here. This is not your meeting. This is the public's meeting. Look at the preamble of the Brown Act. It says we do not deliver ourselves over to any commission or government.
And we have no other public comment cards?
Motion to, no.
No action required.
Thanks for the thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move to item 8A.
Oh, I'm sorry.
8E.
Can we set a date for when they will come back with?
We'll work with Mr. Tiefeng to get that scheduled.
Thank you.
Item 8E, continued from April 29, 2014. Department's report dated April 23, 2014, relative to the bias policing update, annual 2013, and supplemental second quarter 2013.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Commander Stuart Mayoslin, Commanding Officer of Internal Affairs Group.
Morning, Stuart.
This report constitutes the annual report for 2013, so it has year-end data, and there's also information to update you on the status of the second quarter report when I reported that we were possibly re-adjudicating 15 of the complaints that were closed during that quarter. The data for 2013 is fairly consistent with prior years, but the question was posed, does the reduction in complaints Is that good data? Does that mean that the number of complaints has actually reduced? So I thought I would address that little additional piece of information, because I think that's something that you're all probably a lot more concerned about. The data that we do provide in the quarterly report and the yearly report is based upon when complaints are closed. So complaints closed in 2013 were possibly initiated in 2012, as well as even 2011. So the data that's reported doesn't show you the best trending information. So I ran the data a different way, so I'd be able to provide the best information I can as to, based on the year that the complaints were initiated. So what that data shows is that in 2010, there were 281 complaints with bias policing allegations. In 2011, there were 263. In 2012, there were 211. And the best information, which may not be entirely accurate yet for 2013, because there is a high likelihood that there are additional complaints with bias policing allegations that weren't identified at the time of intake as possible bias policing complaints. But that number I have is 2004. So I think what this information is showing you from 2010... 204. I'm sorry, what did I say? 2000? 204.
That's close to.
Off by 1 0.
Those decimals will get you every time.
I need some thicker glasses, maybe. So anyway, I think that shows that bias policing complaints have decreased, at least over the last several years. And actually, I even went through 2014 through the first quarter of the year, and that shows 69, or actually more than the first quarter, and that projects out to about 207. So we've kind of leveled off at about 200 complaints per year with bias policing allegations. But I think it's overall a good sign, a good trend as far as what's happening in this field. And of course, you know, we provide no complaints, more scrutiny than we do the bias policing complaints. We think that it's an extremely important subject. The community's trust in the police department. There are many community members that maybe don't trust us, and that's indicative by the number of complaints. So we believe they're very important. We want to earn their trust, and we want them to have the faith and the confidence that they'll be treated fairly by the Los Angeles Police Department. So we do give them higher scrutiny than almost every other complaints as far as the level of review.
I'm sorry, I have a question, just before you go. The statistics you just cited, is that in the report that we have?
No.
Those are, Commissioner, I'm sorry. I had a discussion with Commander Maislin yesterday, and one of the questions I had asked was so because I couldn't find it in the report, and so he was responding to my question. But,
yes. The report includes data based upon complaints that were only closed and were closed during certain periods of time. When we initiate complaints, although we've trained the entire department to take as detailed an intake interview with the complainant as we possibly can, but we only categorize complaints on intake in certain, a handful of broad categories. So we don't fully know everything about a complaint until it's closed, and when it's closed out, there are many more. There's over 20 different categories of allegations. So the best data we have is on closed complaints. Initial intake, although we strive to get the best information we possibly can, we trained all of our supervisors to do as detailed an intake interview as possible, of course tape recorded. We want them to do that, so if we never see that complaining person again, we have as much information as we possibly can to investigate the complaint. But there are times you get only so much information from somebody, and then during the course of the investigation, what maybe starts out small becomes very big. Of course, some things that look big at the onset turn out to be very narrow. So we don't have full information until they are fully investigated, adjudicated, and go through our quality control process. So that's
So let me tell you what my question really is about, because I'm not one of those people who can hold all those numbers in my head. So I'm going to request that those statistics that you gave at the top, which vary from the year that a case is closed, if we can have that in writing.
Yes.
Only because I'm better when I can see the information in front of me and then digest it. So I now have to sort of go back and, I don't know if, I'm sure you didn't see me, I'm flipping through looking for what, because I didn't remember reading that.
Right.
I thought I'd missed it.
Mhm.
So if we can get that in writing, and in the future, if certainly a day before, if a question's asked about numbers, it would just be helpful to get that in writing. As I said, I'm just not good at maintaining all those numbers in my head.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
If I might, Commissioner, I agree completely, and also, Commander, maybe in the future reports, in addition to providing that data now, in the next few days, in the future reports like this one, I think it would be helpful to include that information, qualified as you have, but so that we get some sense of the context for that.
Right, and I think I'll have to do it, though, as part of the narrative explanation, as opposed to trying to
do a chart.
What comes out of the system.
I just have a couple-
Thank you.
Well, this is a different.
I don't know that he was finished. I think I interrupted you.
Oh, okay.
No, no, that's...
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, I just have a couple quick questions. On page 2 of the report, and this might have been something addressed at the last quarterly report, but I can't remember, so some background context would be helpful. Can you just educate us on the significance of reclassification?
Okay.
Yes.
Historically, we have disciplinary penalties on the department, disciplinary complaints are adjudicated as either sustained, not resolved, unfounded, exonerated, or insufficient evidence to adjudicate. Traditionally, how we viewed those dispositions, we viewed sustained as the only disposition that was actually punitive. So when we had allegations that were unfounded or not resolved or insufficient evidence to adjudicate, our view was they were not punitive actions. There was recently, in November of last year, a court decision in a case filed by the Los Angeles Police Protective League, and in a non-published decision, the Court of Appeals determined that not resolved allegations may be punitive. Now, prior to that case, the only case law that existed was that sustained complaints, you could only sustain complaints and impose a penalty within the applicable statute of limitations.
And can you tell us what that SOL is?
The-
What that statute of
The
limitations?
statute of limitations on most complaints is 1 year from the time it was discovered by an uninvolved supervisor. And there are tolling provisions that allow complaints to be tolled, various tolling provisions that are allowed both under the Peace Officer Bill of Rights and Charter Section 1070. They mirror each other. But sustained complaints and imposing a penalty had to be done within the statute of limitations. But dispositions that did not involve punitive actions, we could change even beyond the statute of limitations. So we would routinely review complaints through the review process we had, and if we believed a complaint that was originally classified as unfounded should really have been classified as not resolved, we would change that. We would notify the employee, give the employee an opportunity to respond, and then based upon their response, either go with the new disposition or leave it what it originally was. But because of the case that was decided in November, with the court deciding that not resolved was a possible punitive action, that meant that complaints that are now past the statute of limitations can't be reclassified from a non-punitive disposition to a punitive disposition. So while we looked at 15 complaints from the second quarter and looked at, we disagreed, we being the review process through internal affairs, disagreed with how they were adjudicated by the chain of command, and we sought to implement the procedure that we put in place after the first quarter report was reviewed last year by sending those 15 complaints to the director of the Office of Operations, the fact is, at the time we sent them, they were all past the statute of limitations. And at the time, operating in good faith, that's how we did things. And then when November came around, we couldn't do it anymore. So we left the original classifications from the ones that even the director agreed with us that could have been changed or should have been adjudicated differently. So it would have changed the numbers on closed complaints by a couple of percentage points would have reduced the number of unfounded complaints and increased the number of not resolved and insufficient evidence to adjudicate complaints.
And can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now to speed up that process, to avoid that problem?
Absolutely. Since we have, and have to review all complaints within the year, I'd say probably the most significant thing that we've done in the last year, since I came to Internal Affairs Group, since Deputy Chief Debbie McCarthy came to Professional Standards Bureau, and we were the two captains in charge of Criminal Investigation Division and Administrative Investigation Division were replaced. We put a renewed emphasis on the consent decree goal of completing investigations within the first 5 months. So last year, through the first quarter of the year, our success in meeting the 5-month goal, we completed approximately 15 to maybe 20% of all investigations within 5 months. Now we're up to slightly over 50% in our criminal investigation division and close to 60% in administrative investigation division. So we've sped up as best we could the completion of our investigations to allow more time for review at the back end. And we've done that through various means, but we've been very successful in doing that. So that's the first thing. And then, of course...
Could you explain how you were going to, but then...
Well, we've streamlined the reporting process, and then just a lot of command emphasis and leadership, getting everybody on board with the importance of doing it, and everybody's bought in, and we've just stepped up the pace.
So not
and we're doing
necessarily
better.
any additional personnel?
No. Matter of fact, our vacancy rate is about the same. We're still at about 27% vacancies, and we've just stepped it up and gotten everybody's got compliance, and they're motivated, and they're working hard. We did streamline the reporting process a little bit to make it simpler to write up their investigations when they're done. But as far as the quality goes, the quality is the same. High-level investigations, doing everything that we can.
What's a reasonable rate that you would estimate of the investigations being completed within 5 months?
Well, the goal is supposed to be 50% in 5 months, and that's what we're hitting, and even gone above it, and I think that's very reasonable. Of course, we're not going to stop there.
Did you set that? Who set the goal of 50%?
Consent decree.
The consent decree. So if we were to better what the consent decree called for, I'm just, and you probably couldn't give us an answer today, but if you had X more hours, if you had 2 more people, I don't know what it would be, but what would it take, for example, to get to 75%? What would it take to get to 90%? I'm interested in, you know what I'm interested in.
Yes, and I don't know that I have an answer for you on that right now. More
Maybe you
people
can
is always
let us
good,
know.
but everybody needs more people.
More people, more money,
Yeah.
more budget.
Right. There isn't a unit on the department that probably will say they have enough.
We are hugely underfunded in this department.
I ask because, of course, this is an important, not that anything else is less important, but as a priority, the issue of biased policing and the complaints and our relationship to the public
Right.
is what I'm addressing here. So if our goal is at least 50%, I actually am very interested in what it would take to get to, as you go through steps and escalators, what does it take to get to here and to here?
And
maybe that's something that as a group that we could focus on.
And that is something that we're trying to do. We're not satisfied at hitting 50%. That just tells us that, okay, maybe we can do better. And we're going to keep emphasizing that and make every effort we can to do better within our existing resources. And of course, if we're fortunate enough to get more, then, we plan on doing even better then.
So is it possible, reasonable for you to give us some sense, not today, because I know you can't do it today, it's not, that's not reasonable, but to give us some sense of what it would take resource-wise, whether the resources are hours or individuals or money or whatever. I just, as a priority, would like to understand what it might take.
Well, I don't know. I think we'll have to think, and it'll probably be a guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. President, I do have a couple more questions. I didn't want to
Go ahead.
interrupt anybody else. First, I want to thank Chief Beck, Commander Maislin's predecessor, Rick Webb, and many others for the hard work, years of hard work that's going into this difficult problem. It's one of the issues I've been working on since I joined the commission, and I appreciate how much work you've done and the progress that's being made. The core conflict for me in this that I find frustrating, and my guess is you do as well, is that there are virtually no complaints of bias policing or racial profiling that result in the conclusion that the officer was guilty of the charge. And I'll talk about that more in a moment. We contrast that with survey after survey, plus anecdotal information, but survey after survey that indicate roughly 40% of African American and Latino men report they believe they were treated differently by law enforcement because of their race. And so those are pretty far apart, 0 or close to 0 and 40%. And so that to me is the problem that warrants our attention, and I appreciate very much your working on it. One of the things I want to mention to my colleagues that I discussed with Commander Maislin, one of the issues here is the cost of gathering data, the cost of monitoring this. And fortunately, just in the last week or so, the Federal Department of Justice has announced the availability of $5 million in grant funding to allow local agencies to make progress on this issue with the data gathering. And so I've encouraged Commander Maislin to pursue that, and he has said they will very likely do that. So, so let me get to a couple of questions. I appreciate very much your starting with explaining about the data, that the written report refers to closed complaints, and then your verbal report about your attempt to look at the complaints themselves when they were filed. If I understand it right, this report, as I believe every prior report has done, indicates that there were 0 cases of bias policing in 2013 found to have been sustained. Do I have that right?
That is correct. That's what the data shows. There was, however, in 2012, or it probably should have been closed in 2013, there was one case where there was an allegation of bias policing that was sustained by the chief of police, and the accused officer was directed to a board of rights, and subsequently the allegation of bias policing, that count against the officer was found, the board found him not guilty of that count. The officer ended up being removed based on other allegations of misconduct, but in 2013, at some point, we should have had, the data should have shown that there was one case where there was a not guilty adjudication, and I'm currently researching to see why somehow that didn't get picked up by the system that we have, because that case was closed. So somehow the system missed it, and that's what I'm trying to find out. But there was one that was sustained that ended up being classified as not resolved, so it will never show as a sustained complaint. I'm sorry, not guilty, rather. It'll show as not guilty because of the Board of Rights process.
I appreciate that, and I continue, as I think you probably are, to some extent frustrated by our difficulty to get into this problem as deeply as I think we need to. Second, Could you talk a little bit about the mediation program, how it's working? I know it's early, very early in that process, but I think I would be interested in hearing what's happening there.
Well, I can. And in 2014 is when we actually began the bias policing complaint mediation pilot program. And of course, that's for bias policing complaints and that may have associated allegations of minor discourtesy. So nothing else with it. No uses of force, no serious constitutional violations. We're talking about, for the most part, strictly bias policing complaints. So through the first, we're in May, 4 months of the year, we've had a total of 67 bias policing cases. 33 of those 67 were actually eligible for, met the criteria for bias policing mediation. 34 were not eligible. So of the eligible 33, 10 were reassigned because either the complainant or the officers did not want to participate in the program. 18 were in the process right now of coordinating mediation for 18 of those complaints. 5 complaints mediation was completed. And of those 5, the first one was not reported to be a positive experience by the complainant, but of the other 4, the reports were from the complainant that they had a positive experience by participating in the mediation program. So we're hopeful that that's more reflective. I mean, 4 out of 5 is 80%. That's a pretty good success rate, very small number, but we've got 10 more in the hopper, and this is something that we're pushing, and we believe it's a really valuable program. We're working with a professor at USC to start the evaluation process of the program. He received a very small grant to begin that process, and that's where the information from Commissioner Salzman, we're looking at the DOJ grant possibly to fulfill other needs to move forward with the evaluation of that.
Thank you. And on the reporting about the positive experience of the citizens, do you have similar information from the officers, their reaction to the mediation?
Yes. Yes, we do.
And those were positive?
Yes.
As well? Great. Would you, as you go forward on these reports, as with the data we talked about before, include those data about the mediation now that it's beginning to happen, what those numbers look like, and what, to the extent you can
I think
evaluate subjectively how well it's going? I would.
That way we can talk,
Yes.
we're really sort of offline here because, not offline, but the mediation wasn't part of this report, so when they are included, it'll be easier to talk about it.
We can make it a quarterly report to include some bias policing mediation information as well.
Commander
And then-
Mosley?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could you just define for us really quickly what counts as an eligible case for mediation?
Pretty much what I told you at the onset, as far as no additional more serious allegations where force or a person was arrested or, and so any of the more serious allegations, and then it has to do with, there were some numbers of whether or not there were prior complaints on the part of the officers, numbers of complaints, or how many eventually after an officer has been through a mediation, he can't be racking up complaint after complaint after complaint and keep going to mediation. At some point, there's an issue there and a problem that has to be dealt with. So various factors like that.
If I just have one last question. So going back to the initial problem, it seems to me the department has done some very aggressive things to try to attack this problem, and I appreciate that. One of the things that happened recently that you report on in the report is the policy change that has the assistant chief over operations review the complaints where there's a disagreement between internal affairs and the chain of command. And in this report, because of the statute problem, there's really you describe it, but we can't really get much information from that. And I think that's an important safeguard in the process. It's a layer of review that I think is quite important. And so I would like also in the future reports for you to be able to report on that, given that you've already made the commitment that you'd be able to avoid most of those, or at least more of those statute problems, so that we can see the results from that piece of the puzzle as well, whether any problems with it, whether it's working well or not. And those the end of my question.
Great. Do we have anything else?
We have public comment.
We have two public comment
Comments?
cards.
Okay.
We have Mr. Jabal Mohammed and Ted Hayes.
Good morning again, Commissioners. Commander Stewart, I appreciate your effort, but when I look at the stats here, these says that complaints closed between January and December 2013, and but we have no resolve. What was the resolution? Okay. Here we have 42 blacks their cases were closed, but we get no resolve. Then we have 5 Caucasians, their cases was closed, but they have no resolve. And then we have 15 Hispanics. So now this 42 blacks, it seems like that's sort of abnormal in terms of we look at the population in general, and then we look at these complaints. Okay, then we have another one. We had Commissioner Schultzman pointed out no guilties. No one was found in regards to all of this. No officers were found guilty of the allegations. We had in-car death. You know, what I mean, how are we judging? What's the process in which we judge when we have these complaints? They're closed. 42. That sounds excessive to me. Out of 200 and some odd complaints filed, 212 complaints filed, 42 of them, you know, and then we get no resolve. So I object to this. This report is not, the information is not sound.
I can understand why the comments made by Mr. Muhammad were obvious, but I also know that most of the people in prison and in jail are black. That means they have the most encounters that result in some kind of a conviction. But let me express one thing that I think is very important. I brought before the Commission some time ago Penal Code 851.5. It has to be posted at the jail, but it wasn't posted at the Metropolitan Detention Center or at 77th Street. Now that's very important because it tells the person what his constitutional rights are once they've been arrested. Right to make a phone call, right to speak to an attorney in private, and so forth and so on. So when that's not posted, everyone who goes to jail has been violated. Now the latest on that is I am told by a sergeant at Metropolitan Detention Center that even though I was there and on 2 occasions never fed one morsel of food, they have no record of my ever being in the Metropolitan Detention Center. You've never been in this jail. That's the latest report. What am I supposed to do with that? I know I was there. I know there's a paper trail that will prove I was there. Because when I left the second time, they took me to County USD Hospital so I could get some food. So what is that when it comes to bias, false statements, failure to report misconduct? I have no idea. But I will tell you this about the LAPD rank and file. They have improved tremendously. The kind of respect, the kind of handling you get on the streets nowadays in the hood is very different from 5 years ago. So I observe very carefully, and I will give them pretty good score on the new image the rank and file is providing out on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
Mr. President, if I may, I would recommend the department in the first quarterly report of 2014, which is in the process of being prepared now, they could respond with the 3 questions that you asked, included in that report, and I can work with Commander Maisland to give him those, but that was to update the numbers that you first spoke about verbally and having those going forward. and then also to increase the percentage of cases that could be concluded within 5 months, what additional resources would be necessary, and lastly, an update on the mediation statistics, including that in the upcoming report. And I think that could answer those.
And also an evaluation of the recently implemented policy change that involved the director of OO.
Okay, very good. So that'll be in your first quarter of 2014 report coming back, so it will not require a separate report back.
Thank you, Richard.
I move approval of the item.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank
number
you.
9.
We are now on public comment. We have 4 public comment cards. We have Eve Sheedy.
Good morning. I'm here on behalf of the city's Domestic Violence Task Force, which is a group under the auspices of City Council, which includes representatives appointed by council members as well as government agencies, LAPD, City Attorney's Office, and so on. I do want to extend on behalf of the Domestic Violence Task Force our deepest condolences to the chief and the department. I also want to say thank you to President Soboroff, who took the time to meet with us this morning and has supported our work and has given us some good ideas to move forward. While you face, we were here at this meeting, and you face a spectrum of issues, I do want to recognize that domestic violence remains a very serious problem within the city. The number we're given is about 48,000 calls for service. Domestic violence is counted as aggravated assault. So when the chief talks about even a slight increase, oftentimes that reflects domestic violence crimes, which often show a very slight increase. The Domestic Violence Task Force is really here as a resource for you. What that means is we do training, we can answer a question, we can take a complaint, and if something is not working, either through LAPD or in any other context related to domestic violence, we want you to know that we're here for you. So that's it. Thank you very much. I am the point person. Mr. T-Fank knows how to reach me. I'm also at the City Attorney's Office. So thank you very much, and thank you, President Soboroff.
Thank you, Eve.
Thank you. Ted Hayes.
Why are we having this dust-up over what the public may say and do here? What's the big deal? First of all, the Brown Act points out that the body may not prohibit criticism, all right? You don't have a place on your agenda for criticism, so that means we can pop off anywhere we want to, right? And criticize anytime we want to, right? Ms. Attorney, is that correct? Okay. I tried to speak on an item, and I was told that I couldn't do that, but anyway, and I had a card already filled out. However, should a member of the public, this is your agenda, however, should a member of the public feel the need to address a matter while the meeting is in progress, and a card may be obtained from the Sergeant of Arms, who will submit the completed form to the board secretary prior to the final determination. I tried to do that. It didn't work. I was told I had to turn the card in earlier. Now, look, let's not go on with this, all right? I know the Brown Act very well. And anytime you have counsel here, they should be familiar with the Brown Act also. Because the Brown Act is very unusual. You know what it says about a misdemeanor this board may be involved in? Is any one of you are present when there's a violation of the Brown Act, you're all guilty of the offense. You may have said nothing, done nothing, voted on anything at all, but if it's determined that you violated the Brown Act, everyone sitting here is guilty. Now, that's kind of unusual, I think, but that's the way it reads. Your attorney should acquaint you with that, all right? So I took this time to try to deal with the issue of how the public is being mistreated by that event where all the officers got up and walked out and created a disturbance. I want you, please, to address that.
Thank you.
Jabbar Mohammed.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chief. This is Jabril Muhammad for Bismillah, the Justice Movement. Public safety. You know, bias policing and reports. There was a complaint filed by Jabril Muhammad, Bismillah, the Justice Movement, almost a year ago in regards to his being violated. And it was filed with the IG, Inspector General, with the misconduct. Now, I anticipate the response for that in 2015, okay? Because in regards to this, these reports that were filed in 2011 and 2012, 2013, they're just becoming resolved. We had 47, 10, 57, 5, 62 cases in January, from January to December. 62 cases, 42 of them were blacks, 5 were whites, and 15 were Hispanics, and no one was found guilty of violating them. And we speak in terms of public safety. Now, how is the public to feel safe when the administration is given the duty to sort out the misconduct, and we find that there is none? Yet we have a video demonstration of a murder taking place in a bar. We have a testimony on the part of the perpetrator that's a lie, yet people are not guilty of perpetrating these crimes. I don't understand that part.
Thank you.
Susan Rocha.
Morning.
My name is Susan Rocha, and I'm a noise victim of Divine Savior Catholic Church at 610 Cypress Avenue, 90065. And I'm also a victim of the law, which gives certain exemptions to them under Municipal Code Chapter 11, Article 5, Section 115.02b. However, they're not exempt under 116 or California Penal Code 415, and yet LAPD refuses to cite. The Northeast Police Station has put in the Ask LAPD computer not to respond to noise violations at that address. So they're allowed to come into my house with 4 bullhorns 6 times a day, every day. Whenever they feel like it, they're blasting their God Bless America in my house and whatever else that they want. There's no church functions going on. There's not a soul around, but they think it's okay to come into my home. That's not okay. That's not okay that LAPD allows it. It's not okay that city attorney won't talk to me because they only talk to city council and the council members. That's not a fair fight. It's not fair. Their noise should stop at their door and not be allowed to come into my home. That's not fair. I'm not allowed to blast my boombox into their church, or they're going to come after me and have me arrested. I don't want their noise in my house. It's an amplified sound system with tape recorded off-key music and off-key piano, like that slamming, like sounds like somebody slamming on a piano, and their off-key music. It's not right. It's not right that you allow that to come into my home, and there's nothing you do about it. The priest has been talked to by Northeast and everyone else. He don't give a damn. It's up to you to take some action.
Thank you.
And there are no other public comment cards. We are now on item number 10, closed session. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item numbers 10A and B in accordance with Government Code 54957.